Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people are having a lot of confusion on today's exit ticket, so I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification out there. So, what you're going to be doing for today's exit ticket is you're going to be finding two different um, devices in your home or apartment that use electricity. So, it has to be something that plugs into an outlet. Um, so, anything that is a cord, it could be an alarm clock, it could be a hair dryer, a curling iron, could be a toaster, could be your microwave, as long as your microwave is not mounted on the wall somewhere. Could be your refrigerator, anything that you can easily get to, um, and maybe take a look at. And I'll explain how you can, um, how we're going to go about figuring out how much electricity those things use. And you need to calculate the cost to use each item for 10 hours at a price of 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So, what the power companies do is they bill you based on how much energy you use, and they charge you by the kilowatt hour. So, every item in your household uses a certain amount of kilowatts, and then they will charge you based upon how long you're using those kilowatts, and we're just going to use 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Every power company is different. 7 cents might be a little bit low, but that's all right. And I know that normally a lot of items you wouldn't run for 10 hours straight. Like, for instance, a hair dryer. You wouldn't have a hair dryer going for 10 hours straight. But it could give you a pretty good idea, if you know that, let's say you run your hair dryer for 20 minutes a day, all right, it might give you a pretty good idea of how much you spend on that hair dryer in a couple months or so. All right, so let's go ahead and solve for one of these problems. I went ahead and I found a toaster. Toaster. I found a toaster in my house, and this is when you go to look for how much electricity, or sorry, how much power something uses, you need to look either maybe underneath it, or maybe sometimes it's attached to the cord. If you ever see like a white tag attached to the cord, sometimes the power consumption is on there. Sometimes it's just on the back side of whatever it is you're looking at. For instance, like when I looked at the toaster, I actually had to, I unplugged the toaster and I picked it up and I looked on the underside of it, without tipping it over, of course. You don't want the crumbs going everywhere. I looked in the underside of it, and it showed me that the amount of power it uses is 1600 watts. Okay. Now, not every single thing is going to give you the amount of power in watts. Sometimes it might give you something like voltage and current instead. Okay, we do have a way to solve for the amount of power used by an object using power equals current multiplied by voltage. So there is another way to solve for the power. If, let's say, for instance, on the tag that you find, it shows you that the voltage is 120 volts and the current is 10 amps. Well, then you can take those two numbers and you can multiply them together, and then you could say that the power is 1200 watts. Okay, so those are just a couple ways that you can look for power. Either it will just give it to you. Oops. Either it will just give it to you, um, or it will give you current and it will give you power. Or sorry, it will give you current and voltage. Sorry. So let's see if I can erase all this real quick. Well, that is just not very efficient, is it? Okay, so the way that we're going to go about this now is, now that we know how much power our object is using, now we are going to have to figure out how much energy it actually uses in kilowatt hours. So in order to figure out the amount of energy it uses, we are going to use the equation P times T. All right, that's power multiplied by time. Well, we already have the power. Okay. The only thing is we have to actually have that power in kilowatts. Because remember, we talked about the power company is going to charge you by the kilowatt hour, not by the watt hour, by the kilowatt hour. So we actually need to convert this. All right. We're going to convert this into kilowatts. So remember when we're going from this watts would be our standard, our base unit, and we're going to kilo. So we're actually going to move our decimal place over 3 places to the left. So I will end up with 1.6 kilowatts. Okay, so that toast uses 1.6 kilowatts of power. So that is our power. So when I go to plug it into the equation here, I'll have 1.6 kilowatts. And now I'm going to multiply it by the amount of time I'm using. Now, the time I do want to have in hours. Because remember, we said the company is going to charge you by kilowatt hours. So in the problem, we're going to say we're using it for 10 hours. Okay. You multiply those two together to get your answer of 16 kilowatt hours. All right. Sometimes there's a dot in the middle. Sometimes there's a dash. So you are using 16 kilowatt hours. If you ran that toaster for 10 hours straight, which you'd have some pretty crispy toast by that time, you would use 16 kilowatt hours of energy. That is not our final answer though. That's just the amount of energy you use. All right. Now the power company's going to take and say, okay, so you used 16 kilowatt hours of energy, and we're going to charge you 0.07 dollars or 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So for every kilowatt hour you use, we're going to charge you 7 cents. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take 16 and we're going to multiply that by 0.07. So what we can say is that when you multiply those two together, you get 1.12, and then that is just a dollar amount. So you would get charged $1.12 or $1.12 if you were to run your toaster for 10 hours straight. Okay, so you think about this, it doesn't seem like a lot because one, we don't run our toaster for that long ever. But there's so many little things in your house that use a lot of power. You have all these little light bulbs everywhere. You think about how many light bulbs are in your house, and if you think of a typical light bulb being around 60 watts, and if you have those on all the time, those are going to add up. And then your bigger things in your house, like your furnace or your air conditioner, maybe your water softener or your water heater, those are going to use a lot more power, and those are going to accumulate a lot of kilowatt hours. Because in the wintertime, you think about like your furnace is running all the time. We have cold winters here in Minnesota, so your furnace runs a lot. So your furnace is going to use a lot of kilowatt hours, and that is what ends up making your energy bill that you get from the electric company go up so much in the wintertime. Okay, so hopefully this cleared some things up for everybody. If you have any further questions, please make sure that you let me know. Have a great day.